Hello, everyone. Welcome to another office hour, astrology office hour. I'm Dr. Claire Moon, and we're going to be here for 45 minutes to maybe an hour. And bring your astrology questions, whatever they are. I probably can't get too much into personal stuff because I have to see the full chart, of course. But I did do a little call for questions earlier this week. I have some questions that I'm going to be covering today that people brought in, which are awesome. But again, bring whatever other queries that you have and throw them in the chat. There's a chat to the right-hand side of your screen. There's about a 20-second delay. If there are people here, if you're catching this later, and you wish that you would have gotten a question in. Thing one, I am on Instagram, and that's usually where I do my call for questions. I should probably start saying that more explicitly. And thing two, you can always put your questions in the comments below, and I'll get it for next time. And you do not need to be present to win. I will answer your question even if you're not here, or at least respond to it. Sometimes I don't have answers, I have more of a response. So, anyway, without further ado, let me hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me get my notes going here. I have a bunch of links below. Some are for my own website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. Some are for things that I've created that are free resources. So I've got a beginner astrology cheat sheet that's more of a beginner guide. It got bigger than a sheet. It's like 20 sheets. So that's linked below. I also have just a link to oh, I don't know if that is the right link. I'll have to make sure. Oh yeah, my favorite astrology resources. So I just have a list of links. It's really fun. You can just click around and it's kind of like a little trail of cosmic breadcrumbs to other astrological things, teachers, lectures, all my favorite things. So look all at that below. That's fun, especially if you're new to astrology. Those are some good starting places. And I guess in particular, I am going to be talking about house systems today. There are some links below that are going to refer to that. So I'll mention them when I get there. But specifically, I've got a really great episode of the Astrology podcast that had Chris Brennan and Luis Ribiero, and they go over all of the main house systems that we have. Not all of them. I think there's so many systems now, but they go through all the main ones and really break down how they're calculated, what they are. So check that out. That's just a good resource for anyone who's interested in astrology. Usually, if you go more on Twitter, people are arguing about house systems. Um, more listen to 4 hours of people talking about it, and you'll figure out why we should all stop arguing about it. But anyway, maybe that's where I should start. That was a really good question from Jennifer. Um, they are wondering about reading multiple house systems. Um, I guess one of the things that I don't have linked on this topic, and this is because I just want you to Google it and find where you want to buy it, but Rhetorius, the Egyptian, their compendium, the astrological compendium. This is a really great book, a really great little book. And Rhetorius was a Hellenistic astrologer, but more from the later part of that period of time. So Hellenistic astrology ranging from about 1 BC or 100 BCE to about 700 CE. Rhetorius, now I'm forgetting the exact centuries, but I feel like it was somewhere between 500 and 700 CE. That's when he was from. So later in the tradition, and the cool thing about Rhetorius is that because he does come in later in the Hellenistic tradition, or his writings come from there, that he gives a pretty good idea of what Hellenistic astrologers had come up with over their several hundreds of years that they were doing this. But anyway, this is a great little book because it has a cool example of this question about reading different house systems at the same time, or reading a chart in more than one house system. So reading it as Placidus, reading it as whole sign, doing a both and, which is my short answer. But I love this book because it gives an example from a really long time ago of this very question. And so it's a really old question. And they give an example of a nativity. It's called the Grammarian. And if you do have this book on your shelf, I'm looking at page 159. And they give an example essentially where they're interpreting a planet in the 10th house whole sign, but, and let me see if I can get an example going. Yeah, see if I can get an example. Here we go. So, not the exact same example as the one in the book, but they're interpreting a planet in the 10th whole sign house. But if we were using, say, Placidus or a different quadrant-based house system, the 10th house would actually start at this midheaven. And then this planet would actually, it's on the cadent side of that angle, so it would be in the ninth house. And so we've got examples of reading for both, oh, a planet in the 10th. So we'll talk about that planet in relating to that person's career. Or we will look at that planet and relate it more to, in this case, ninth house topics, which would be long distance travel, advanced education, publishing, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, the answer is both and. If you're ever wondering, oh my gosh, which house system do I use? Do I use whole sign? Do I use Placidus? Do I use Alcabitius? The answer is a bunch of them. It probably depends on the techniques that you're using and which one you like better. I have heard some people say that they wonder if the quadrant-based systems like Placidus. So let me actually just put that up here and I'll show you what I mean. I've heard some people say that these quadrant-based systems show more of like the internal lived experience of someone, and whole sign houses represent more of the external kind of what a life looks like from the outside. I personally reject that. I do not find that to be the case. Usually, when I'm reading astrology, no matter what house system I'm using, I am seeing examples of those things playing out both internally, psychologically with the person, as well as externally in their environment and with other people. So if you've heard that on the astrology streets, just know that from my own experience, N of one, I'm only one person, but I have experienced internal and external manifestations no matter what house system I'm using. And again, just using both, I think can provide a really good picture of a person, which brings me to my last point with it. And oh shoot, I wish I had a mug, but this'll have to do. Look it. It's my regional fizzy water if you're familiar. But in any event, let's pretend like this is you. And we're looking at you from different angles, different house systems, whole sign, Placidus, maybe sidereal astrology, Vedic astrology, maybe you're getting a tarot reading. So we're getting this whole different, we're triangulating like a GPS and getting this more full picture of who you are by reading all of these different ways. So I know I didn't simplify that at all, and I didn't give anyone any easy answers, but the answer is to explore. And at the end of the day, it does matter which one you feel like fits the best in terms of which one you might tend to move toward the most. So I use whole sign houses the most. I tend to feel like it jives with my experience the best. I've definitely talked to people where whole sign does not express for them their story in a way that they feel like some of the other ways of looking at through these lenses does. And that's okay. So the good answer too is that there's no right or wrong answer. Very both and. And thank you for that question. That was a really good one. And hopefully that covers some bases. But yeah, I also linked a course, or it's not a course, it's a class by Cameron Cassidy, and that's linked below. And that's on the great spheres, the equator, the meridian, the horizon, the ecliptic, all those big circles that we're in. And that's another important piece, I think, if you're really wanting to dive into house systems, understand what they're about, and have a good feel for like, why would I choose whole sign, which divides up the ecliptic, versus some other system that divides up another of the great circles. And one way to do that is to really learn about the great circles, see what they represent, and then you can come into this conversation of, oh, well, why do you use XYZ house system? You can come into that from an angle too of, I guess, space geometry, whatever they call it. So yeah, that's another resource below that you can choose to explore if you would like. So let me see Hello, Reverend Kai's in the house. We got another astrologer here. Um, yeah, it's there's no one house system to rule them all. Very well put. It'd be nice if there was a right answer sometimes, but sometimes it's nice to not have one. So then that brings me to my next question, which comes from uh this comes from Fallen, and they asked me what my favorite things were in terms of transits that I was seeing for 2025. And I guess I'll bring up the wheel again. So I'm just going to riff on transits for a minute, I guess. And I had to think about it. I was really just focusing on, because I was writing up my annual report, and I am going to post within the next 2 weeks a standalone video all about my overview for 2025. It's not going to be that in depth, but I am going to cover probably 8 or 9 topics, just looking at the year ahead of 2025 and seeing what was interesting to me, what my thoughts are on that. So I'm going to try to get that out as soon as possible so that I can then listen to everyone else's. So watch out for that. But I did pluck a few more minor things that I'm more excited about that aren't like the main ingresses or the main, you know, Neptune, Saturn things. Let me get my whole sign houses back. My proclivities. Oh my gosh, I had Lilith on here from earlier today. I had quite the day. All right, bye-bye, Lilith. So the first thing, the Jupiter-Saturn trine. We have been dealing with, and we will continue to be dealing with, the Jupiter-Saturn square, and that is really it peaked in August in intensity, and then it backed off, and now it's starting to peak again in intensity, which it will by December 24th, and then it's going to back off. And then I think that the third one is in like May or June of 2025. But in 2025, what I'm excited about is that after we get past this square, we're going to start to see moments where Saturn and Jupiter are going to be in a trine, which I am very excited about because that it's our planets of growth and our planets of restriction. So kind of that expansion, contraction, growth, limitation. And that's, I mean, it's natural in nature, in our own bodies, to have these cycles of growth and decay, growth and loss. And when those two forces are in a square, it's kind of the growing, it's like growing pains. It's like I'm trying to grow, and especially in this situation where Saturn is a little earlier in the zodiacal order, which matters. It matters what order they're in. If, say, we had Saturn in Cancer and Jupiter in Pisces next year, that would be a different story. Here, that limiting, constricting influence has been the stronger influence. And so the square we've been having, which has been a little crunchy, it can be a little bit more frustrating because it is more on that constrictive or limiting side. Now, we don't want just, growth without any limitation. That usually ends up in a bad way. But what I'm really looking forward to is getting into a trine with these two planets, and then those growth cycles that going back and forth between growth and constriction. It's in a more easeful relationship where what we're trying to grow isn't so limited. It's not so restricted anymore. We're not having to make so many adjustments and changes and pivots to keep growing. So I'm really looking forward to Jupiter having a little bit more freedom than they've had. It's not going to be for the whole year of 2025, but we will get a taste of that. And, it's a longer cycle, but eventually Jupiter will make it past the opposition with Saturn. And then we're going to have Jupiter on the louder side of that equation. We're going to have more growth versus constriction. So that's a longer view, but it'll be a nice change. I'm looking forward to it. Another thing, similarly, trines, but Mars and Saturn. So Mars and Saturn generally are planets of extremeness, extreme hot, extreme cold, extreme dry. And they're planets that they can do discipline, they can do motivation, they can do energy, structure. So when you put them together, it's like motivation and discipline. And it ends up being kind of a nice little machine in my mind. Uh, we had a little bit of this. God, when did we have this last? Work smarter, not harder. We're gonna have more of this in 2025, but what I'm especially looking forward to is that it's gonna be a Mars Saturn trine in fire. Because we've been having it in water, which is cool. It's been fine. But um yeah, October 2023. It looks like we had one going on then. So quarter 3 of 2023. Uh yeah, and then when Mars is in Cancer, which we will also be experiencing for quarter 1 and quarter 2 of 2025, we're going to have that trine show up there. And then later in the year, we're going to get just a taste of it in Aries and Leo. And it just feels like good getting shit done kind of weather. And I'm looking forward to it. It's like the motivation of Mars is not being held back by Saturn in a really frustrating way, like it can do in a square, like I was just talking about with Jupiter. But in this case, in a trine, Saturn can give more of like a gentle set of bumpers for Mars to work within, or a gentle set of rules or whatever structure Mars needs to make the most of its energy, and just being really discerning about the use of energy. And then when we get that all into a fire sign, set of fire signs, then it's like very action oriented, even more. So yeah, I'm ready for that. That looks flipping cool. Uh, let's see. June of 2025, we've got both benefics in Cancer. I'm looking forward to it. The last time we had Venus and Jupiter together was, I mean, we have it every year. It was in Gemini. But the special thing here is that Jupiter is going to be exalted, and that is extra juicy. So, did I say June? I must be wrong. Oh no, I'm thinking about Jupiter in Cancer, sextile Venus and Taurus. So yeah, let's back up. I was one ahead of myself. So in June, we're going to have Venus finally getting done with all of their experiences in Aries, and Venus is going to finally be in Taurus. And then we're going to get Jupiter in Cancer. And we've got both of our benefics either domiciled or exalted, meaning they're functioning very well. So the planets that are in charge of good stuff are able to do good stuff for us more easily. And it's being put together in a nice way with a sextile. The last time we had something similar to this, I wrote it down. We haven't had that since they were domiciled in April of 2022, when we had both Jupiter and Venus in Pisces. So April of 2022 was the last time that we, to my knowledge, had both benefics. And maybe I missed something, so tell me if I did, because like so many planets are retrograde. But I'm pretty sure this hasn't happened since April of 2025, that they both been a very high dignity level and able to help in their ways very well. Um, so in again June of 2025, we're gonna have that nice sextile, and then August 12th, that's when they come together in a conjunction in Cancer. So that is something I'm looking forward to. Especially for the Cancer areas of our chart, there's just going to be a lot of goodness, a lot of stability coming in if you're having a lot of instability right now or in the near future. These planets will come in and help to clean up whatever Mars was up to for most of this and the first half of next year. Um, so that's it. And then I think there was one other thing. Yeah, I guess the only other thing. So this is more of a curiosity point. Uh, there's an interesting air trine, and this is also in August. There's an air trine between Pluto, Uranus, and then Mars is going to tap into that when it enters into Libra. So August of 2025, this looks very potent, very powerful, intellectually speaking, with messages. Hopefully everyone can behave themselves because what's flowing freely here is a lot of energy, a lot of energy of change, more specifically, of disruption. And yeah, it just looks like a really interesting time. So those were some of my more, I guess, I don't know if I want to call them minor, but not like the main ingresses, not the main kind of things that most people are going to be talking about, but those looked like some more positive things. So, um, Jupiter, Saturn trine, Mars, Saturn trine, benefics being in good shape. That's what we're here for. So thanks for that question because I, like most people, need a reminder to look at the positive. What am I looking forward to? I can't just be this Mars Scorpio threat detector all the time. It's too threat detecty. Okay, speaking of threats, um, threat neutralized, but before I get to my next question, I do want to mention a recent happening in life, and it was in America. There were a bunch of college sports happening on the 30th of November. And every year, there's this whole ritual that these college sports ball teams do where they plant a flag in someone else's field. It's fun, everyone does it, blah, blah, blah. So that is not new. But I thought that what was interesting is this year when that went on, you'd search November 30th, Google for that for college football flag planting. Um, there was a few things going on in the sky that really looked like that, and I had a little like astrologer good chuckle because sadly, like a lot of people got into fights. There was a lot more conflict than normal, and police had to be called in. There was pepper spraying. People got like players got a lot of fines. Teams were getting fines. So it got a little extra spicy. And I looked at the sky, and usually I don't think of new moon time as super active or this kind of thing. Usually I put this kind of thing on a full moon when it's a bit more active. But we had a trine coming from Mars. So that last aspect the moon got right before that new moon was this trine from Mars, just supercharging it with energy, conflict, whatever Mars is bringing to the house. And Mars is itself being supercharged by Pluto right now. And then finally, the flag planting just felt incredibly, Jupiter, Mercury in each other's places in what is considered a foreign land, an opponent's land, as far away from your stuff as you're going to get. And that's exactly what these planets were experiencing. That's what people were doing down here, is being that person on someone else's court and, doing their thing. And here, proclaiming things. Gemini, people who proclaim things are Gemini. Jupiter, of course, being loud, having opinions. Mercury doing a lot of the same over yonder. So it was just so perfect. And then the next aspect after that moon was the square with Saturn. And it was like, yeah, people got fines. Saturn was like, no, you can't be that rowdy. People got, yeah, people got enforced. So, um, I just wanted to point that out. That was just a spot on day in terms of what the weather was looking like in the sky and how it was coming out down here. Yeah, thankfully no serious injuries, it sounds like, but let's see, we've got some other people coming on and hi everyone. Welcome. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Um, my Mars retrograde thing has been I threw my back out for the first time pretty bad. I'm almost 37. I suppose it is getting to be about my time to do that. Uh, yeah, it's not fun. I'm like, wow, this is going to be a long road. And it happened, gosh, it was like December. 2nd. It was like December 2nd, and Mars stationed on December 6th. So it was right there, and I was like, shoot, this is going to be a longer story, isn't it? And I basically found out, and that's the meditation we should do. Strong back, soft front. Joan Roshi Joan. She tells me strong back, soft front, and now it's my gym strategy as well because my front side is all tight and my back side's all floppy, and I got to reverse it. I need to make my back strong and I need to make my front floppy. So, oh boy, strong back, soft front at the gym. Um, yeah, hopefully no one else is having any Mars retrograde slowdowns. Catching up on comments here. Here's a question. So someone's saying that their predictions, their delineations keep falling flat when it comes to their own chart. What would I suggest to review or learn more about strengthening delineations as a newbie? Yeah. So, I mean, the foundations, there's never too much of them too often. Really drilling the meanings of signs, the meanings of planets, practicing planets and signs like a lot of, and sometimes I still do this for fun, if especially if it's like a new technique or a new point that I'm playing with. Like when I was learning about Vesta, the asteroid Vesta, I did a mental exercise, and you can write it if that helps, but writing down, just riffing, just playing with what might Vesta be doing or how might they be doing it based on their sign, based on so, and then knowing that a sign is made up of, well, four plus things, but the element, the modality, the ruler, what am I missing? Myth, derive, or no, that's houses. But knowing those components. So check out my beginner guide, and it breaks down where do all of these things come from. And then so like Mars in a fixed sign in Leo, they're going to have some similar properties to Mars in Scorpio because they're both fixed signs. So we know that that Mars is going to be acting in a certain way in a fixed sign. But then what about, fire versus water? This is another exercise you can do is just really doing that. Now, that's step one. Step two is then doing that with more than one planet. And then the third thing, adding aspects and how are they relating to each other? Are they relating to each other? And then in your own chart, knowing the rising sign, getting the houses in order. And so, for instance, with this Cancer rising, if this were their natal chart, if they were born right now, if I were talking about what Mars would be up to, I would be saying, okay, what are they doing related to your money, related to how you get resources, how you get your needs met? And how are they maybe interacting with Jupiter here in Gemini? They have a sextile. That's a happy relationship, or they're maybe helping each other somehow. So really sitting with what a Jupiter and Gemini might be like, how they might be helping Mars in Leo. Um, you know, it does take a lot of just sitting around and thinking, a surprising amount, in my opinion. And if you're a newbie, I mean, this is something too that it's like when you make a chili and you put the chili in the fridge, and so for some reason it's like better on day 2 or 3. The longer you sit with this stuff, the more you watch like the moon in a sign, or like right now, watch what Mars is like in Cancer, you know? How is conflict going for you right now with Mars stationing? And just being with astrology, this is a lifetime sport that we will only get better the longer we do this because you're continually bombarded with weather and examples in that weather that just add to your own repository of examples and understanding. It's kind of like learning a language. And in that way, just keep working on those foundations. I mean, I just went back to a lecture from Austin Coppock that I had been sitting on forever. It was about planetary combinations and just putting two planets together in combination. It's called 36 Dramas. You can get it on Austin Coppock's website. That's a really great one. Yeah, just continually taking in info, hearing other people talk about planets as well to give you ideas. Similar to like when you're playing a musical instrument, you're gonna play other people's songs, first. But yeah, like watch your own life. So I guess that's the last piece too, is when you're trying to then delineate things in your own birth chart, which is a natural first place to start with because you know you best. So it's like, yeah, I know my own life the best. I know my own history the best. Um, you really do have to, I mean, if you want to look backward, be a historian. Look in your old emails, look in your old, like, God, I went through all of my old art from when I was a kid with my parents. And like, I was like, geez, I won this big award when I was like 10. I didn't remember that at all. And then looking back at your astrology and being like, oh, yeah, the sun was on my midheaven or whatever. And I was 10. So yeah, I won the coloring contest. So that's super sleuthing. And then in the present, what you got to watch. Like, I'm not saying you don't do any of this. This might all be a lot of stuff that you're doing. So hopefully, if you are doing these things, it's validating that you are doing the right stuff. Just keep doing it, and it'll all start to gel eventually. But um, yeah, you definitely got to be paying attention to your life, like and yourself. Like watching the moon recently hit these hit this opposition between Mars and Pluto. I've been watching the moon as it gets into a square with these things for the last like 2 months. Um, and I can tell. And in the moment, I'll sometimes on that day forget that that's going to be going on, and I'll wake up just spicy. I'll wake up just rearing to argue with someone online or just, whatever. And I have to remember it takes that skill too of remembering, oh, yeah, the moon is in this place, and then looking it up and being like, oh, I better not say shit online today. So that's another big part of learning that I don't think we explicitly talk about enough is just those little moments of paying attention and being and validating like, yeah, this is that. That's what's going on now. So hopefully that helps. I know there was like a lot of stuff, but that's that's part of my own process of just practicing synthesizing. Anne asks, what significance of 4 planets retrograding in Aries and Pisces this year? Yeah, I keep telling people March is very interesting. March and April. We've got Venus and Mercury doing a retrograde in the same place, and then they're gonna move back from that place of Aries into Pisces. So usually, and I hear Chris Brennan saying this a lot too, that when a planet is retrograding back from one place into the next, it tends to tie those two house topics together, those two buckets of life topics together. I noticed that as well. So the Aries and Pisces part of life might be getting some kind of refinement, some kind of reconsideration, well, once over, kind of a, it could be really minor things like when you're just, repairing something or, polishing something. It could be more drastic, like rearranging the entire living room if it's your fourth house or something. So allowing for things to be up in the air in March into April. Don't hold on to any specific expectations for March and April. Just let things kind of take time to settle out. And it usually like these are really good opportunities to go back and look at things from the past, tie up loose ends, and you know, it's really going to depend on the house topics that Aries and Pisces are for you in terms of where that's going to come out. So if you're really getting into more of the advanced stuff, what you can do is look also at the house topics of Mercury and Venus, because and that gets to be a lot. And this is where I don't sit there trying to like put together 50 different life topics. This is where you just, if it's your own life, I would just watch and wait and see until you start to see something matching. Or if it's a person, I'm going to just ask them, like, hey, what's going on with your money? What's going on with your partnerships? Instead of trying to guess what it's going to be, because it can be so many things when you start to add what might be rearranged from, say, this Libra rising's first house, 12th house, ninth house, eighth house. Because anytime Venus and Mercury are going retrograde, they're going to be rearranging things or reconsidering things or rethinking things, but maybe also having to do with the other topics that they're in charge of. in other areas of the chart. So those are some thoughts about that, but definitely I think the most practical advice for everyone is to just let things in March and April be open-ended. Don't hold too tightly to the steering wheel. Be as flexible and adaptable as you can. And it's a good time to redo things. So it's going to be in my place of short distance travel in my third house. I'm not going to be texting and driving. I am going to maybe walk. I don't know. Try new things, do things differently, but definitely not going to be texting and driving for Aquarius risings in March and April. Good question, because yeah, we got eclipses in March. We've got yeah, I'll save it for the annual review because I'm going to talk about some of this stuff there because there's also void of course moons we have to discuss. There's March is very fascinating. I think if anyone's waiting to see like what is this plot line going toward in like February, just wait to see what March is going to do. It'll shake things out probably. Um, Youngstown. I feel like, well, there's probably a few in different states, but I hope you're well. Yeah, the Mars in my sixth. Mars has been in my sixth, and I keep getting all these like just little bumps and bruises and cuts and burns, and it's like so Mars. I'm like, you know what? This is fine. If this is what this comes out as, this is great. This is fine. As long as it's nothing worse. I should go get my knife sharpened. Yeah, okay. Stars and Gamers says March seems like a great time to make sure we're getting plenty of sleep. Yes, absolutely. March is going to be a great time to do things differently. Anytime there's a bunch of retrogrades, right now is one of those times. We've got right now Mercury, Jupiter, Mars. So we've got three more personal planets that are doing things differently. They're going over past things. They're tying up loose ends. I'm finally reading a book that I've been wanting to read forever. I'm finally getting back to my research. It's happening. Not all good things, but um, okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank God. Thank God we have each other to talk to because, yeah, no one in my real life really that I see regularly knows about astrology. So this is it. This is pretty much what I have to talk about it. There was one non-astrology thing that I wanted to mention that happened to me that is divination related. So, okay, if anyone follows me on Threads, you know that I got a Pokemon deck and I've been divining with the Poke deck. So there's a decent amount of cards in it. It's not like super huge. There's probably like 20, 30. I don't even know. Haven't even counted them. But I had asked recently the deck about my current physical state. And I was, I guess deep down, I think I was hoping for some encouragement, like about my physical, like how bad is it? How many months am I going to be out of the gym because of this back thing? And so I drew a card. And so okay, just to be clear as well, I am an Aquarius rising, and so Mars has been in Cancer in my sixth house, and it will return to Cancer in my sixth house very soon. Cancer is the crab, right? And guess what card I pulled? I pulled the card Crawdont. Look at Crawdont. And I pulled him reversed. I pulled a reverse Crawdont. He's a crayfish. He's got pincers. It's like, man. So this is my divination for the physical, like how is my body gonna go in the near future? And they gave me a reverse crab. So that's how things are gonna go. And that so it literally is like Mars retrograde. That's how it's gonna go for you. And I was like, all right, I'll follow Mars. I'm just gonna go with that. And I'm really just going to pace myself along with Mars. And so another fun thing you can do if you have Astro Gold, sorry if you do not, but I think there's got to be other ways of finding this information. Maybe this is an invitation for me to figure out how to find this information elsewhere. But the speed of things, their average speed of the planets, I'm going to follow this. And I think I'm just going to do my movement in accordance with the speed of Mars. Because as they go retrograde, they will pick up a little bit of speed. They're not going to get up to like their full speed by any means, but they're going to get a little bit of momentum. And then they'll slow down again. And then they'll go forward. But between now and February 23rd, Mars is going to pick up some steam again. So, I think I'm gonna be able to, at some point, build up some momentum myself. That's what I'm gonna keep telling myself. Crawdont be damned. I'm not going to be able to monetize this because I've been swearing. That's another thing too. Mars retrograde, Mars stationing. My level of swearing has been going up with the Mars stationing. And very interestingly, swearing, the part of the brain that has to do with swearing, especially if it's like an involuntary, kind of like you hurt yourself and you say dang, the part of the brain that lights up is actually a movement center of the brain, a movement part of the brain. And so just Mars being both crass language, movement, energy, and like, yeah, the brain does both of those. It's like, isn't that wild? It's like, that's some Mars stuff. All right, what's my next question? Um, I talked about the football people. We need to talk about secondary progress charts. So Angela sent me a good question about um, how to read the secondary progressed moon versus transiting moon. This person had a secondary progressed Gemini moon, a Sag stellium. Um, so we're gonna get into some secondary progressed stuff and I think call it a day or whatever other questions people have. So last call for any other questions that you might have. Uh, but yeah, so one fun thing I learned this week from this book, Primary Directions by Martin Ganston. Placidus, that's a Latinized version. His real name was Placidus de Titi. Yeah, yeah. And Regiomontanus, his name was like Johann Mueller or Mueller or some shit. So these dudes' names are actually not the same. So anyway, Placidus, I found out that they were the person that made, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I just read in this book, I swear, that Placidus made secondary progressions, which is kind of loosely, kind of like a method of directing something around and saying, okay, this planet, we're going to release it from this point and it's going to move along in a particular fashion at a particular rate. And that as that planet moves around, just like in transits, just like with secondary progressions, with primary directions, we're looking at that planet and the aspects that it's making as it goes around, and we can start to make symbolism out of that, and we can start to predict the timing of things or validate past timing of things with some of these techniques, transits being one, progressions being another, primary directions being another. Um, so secondary progressions is like the fractal. It's like a fractal of 1 degree of the sun's movement. So usually the sun moves about a degree a day. In secondary progressions, the sun moves a degree a year. In transit land, the moon moves through a sign about every 2.5 days. In secondary progressions, the moon moves through a sign every 2.5 years. So it's like this fractal of time that is rooted in a birth chart. So let's see if I can call upon, invoke Pamela Anderson. Did I put her chart in here? No, I didn't. Bummer. Oh, I'll just use myself then. I'll save Pam for next time because she is a really fascinating example. I wanted to get rid of my stage name, my pen name this year, but a horary astrologer told me not to. So I guess I'm stuck with two names. But like cat's out of the bag. I've been this name. It's been up here the whole time. Hi, everyone. So this is me. I will always have a Pisces moon. That will never change. But if I'm going to do secondary progressions, which is like transits, but way slower, I can see that the moon right now is in Cancer. So for the better part of the last 2.5 years, I have had a Cancer flavored moon. And it's almost yes, my Pisces moon is still there, but now we've got some Cancer flavoring on top. And when my moon moves into Leo, then I'll have a little bit more Leo flair to my moon than just my normal Pisces. So it's kind of like this additive layering effect. That's how I do it. And I like to watch the moon as one of my primary points with secondary progressions because it is such a slow technique that it takes a long time for things to move. So like the faster moving things are what is really worth watching. So like the moon, Mercury, Mercury stations. I'm usually not looking at the slower planets because they just don't move that much. But of course you can. You can look at the whole thing. So that's thing one that we note is just what different sign is the moon in? And the other thing we note, so for this person then, if they, what did they say they were? They said a stellium in Sagittarius. I don't know what your natal moon was. So like whatever your natal moon is, you're still that. Like that'll still come through in your life. But for 2.5 years, you're going to have more of a Gemini flavored moon. So I just got done with having a bit of a Gemini moon. I'm used to mutability because I have a Pisces moon naturally. So that part wasn't very different for me. But the air part of it and the intellectual kind of nature of dealing with emotions, that wasn't my normal MO. And that came out much more when the moon was secondary progressed in Gemini for me. So I also was just like doing, so that's the other part of it is then wherever that secondary progressed moon is, you're probably going to be focused more on those house topics during that time. So for me, I have been very focused on the sixth house for the last 2.5 years. Um, my own health, labor, and just getting through the day. My dental hygiene has never been better. I'm going to try to keep it up when the moon leaves there, but this was a really inspiring time. Um, the last thing I like to look at with the moon is its phase. So, right now I'm coming into this full moon. That's pretty different than my natal quarter moon. So, look at this whole cycle. So usually the moon takes 28 days to go around in transit time. Here it takes 28 years approximately for the moon to go around by secondary progressions. And so this lunar cycle, this 28-year long lunar cycle in secondary progressions becomes this bigger, longer thing that you can watch. And the moon is going to grow in light and be more busy and active. And then, usually when people are coming into their secondary progressed new moon, they're getting tired. They're regrouping. They're letting go of a bunch of stuff in their life and new stuff is coming in. And maybe life is busy, but they don't have a lot of energy to deal with it. But it's not forever. So that's the good news. So in any event, look at the moon phase. That's the other thing. And really, I mean, the interpretation, extremely similar to transiting planets. It's pretty much the same. Very few, I do very few differences when interpreting transiting planets versus secondary progressed planets. I'm interpreting them the same way. The only thing that's different is the timing. It just is way slower. So if I'm seeing, so let's try an aspect then. This is something I'm not looking forward to. But well, let's do the square. When my moon is eventually going to square Mars and Saturn, that's going to be like, I mean, the moon is going to be, if they have a 13-degree orb. I mean, I'm going to be feeling that for a good year. And then Saturn. So there's going to be a good 2 years of my life, a year of my life, maybe two, where I'm going to be dealing with some intensity. So, and it's a longer thing. And then I can watch, all right, when is the moon getting out of Virgo? And I'll just be like waiting for the moon to get into Libra at that time in 2028, 2029, whatever the hell is going on then. So, yeah, you can definitely use that transit knowledge in the same way, just know it's slower. The main way that I am different about it, though, is with retrogrades and retrograde stations. Um, I don't consider secondary progressed retrograde planets to be like ineffective or useless or not coming to fruition or any of those more harsh delineations of retrograde planets. I think of it more of a genre shift than anything and doing things differently. I look more into that way of interpreting retrograde planets in that kind of it's a phase shift. We're doing things differently from here on out to the next station. So one of my favorite examples comes from Stephen Forrest, which I don't know if someone else has done it previously, but I feel like I stumbled upon an expansion because Stephen Forrest talks about how when Bob Dylan, when their secondary progressed Mercury station retrograde, Bob Dylan went from acoustic to electric. What my partner helped me realize is that later, and I looked at Bob Dylan's chart, and on his second station, when Mercury stationed direct, like 20 years later, that's when he started doing jam band stuff with the Grateful Dead for the first time. So there was like he was doing this jam band stuff, which is a whole different animal than showing up and playing the same set over and over and over again. So yeah, it's definitely a genre shift. What we'll talk about next time, I'm going to use Pamela Anderson as an example. Um, I think hers is to do with Venus, but she's done this whole transformation of coming back to just like not wearing makeup, not really doing herself up, dolling herself up like she used to. And the way that she has been talking about this transformation and realizing like this whole way of presenting herself wasn't really authentic to who she felt like she was. And so she's making these big shifts and you can see it in her secondary progress chart. So don't get scared when you see, retrograde planets happening in a secondary progress chart. It's usually just a shift of some kind. So that's my little primer on secondary progressions. Thank you, Placido to TT from a long time ago. Another resource, excuse me, besides Stephen Forrest, who is more evolutionary astrology, but I do love how he treats secondary progressions. Kelly Surtees is another really good one. She has some material on secondary progressions that's really excellent. So check that out. I do not have that linked anywhere, but it's a quick Google. Um, all right. Oh, good question. Jendi asks, so expanding on this idea of secondary progressions, can you throw transits on the outside as a third wheel? You can. You sure can. It's like looking at the root chart. I never put up a tri-wheel. It just hurts my brain. But some people's brains might love this. I have no idea. Um, but look at that root, and that root is being affected by one shell of stuff and then by another shell of stuff. And I'm not really mixing together the layers of like transits and secondary progressions. I'm not doing that so much. I'm more treating them each as their own standalone treatment to the root chart and then adding them on together, very both and. If this kind of view helps you to do that, cool. But I wouldn't get too worried about like, say, like my transiting sun is moving over my secondary progressed Saturn. I mean, it's really close to my natal. What would be a different example? Um, yeah, I'm not gonna squish together transits and progressions without a root chart. Final answer. Yeah, that's pretty busy, huh? Oh my goodness. Make it all stop. Um, think that is it. Let me just see if there's any final things. I'm gonna skip my philosophical talk because there's not enough good time for it. But if anyone has any final things, or if you're listening to this later, definitely share your questions below if you have any. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to stop. And I'll save Pamela Anderson for next time. And I have some Jupiter and Cancer things, but I guess we got plenty of time to get into that. Um, spoiler alert, there's a lot of cult people who've got it's not all the Jupiter and Cancer people, of course. It's a really nice placement, but just like some interesting examples I'm going to bring up later. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I did hear okay, being I didn't do any mindfulness stuff at all, I was going to do it, but I didn't, and that's okay. It's fine. Everything's retrograde. But I did hear one really good one-liner that help me kind of deal with some frustrations. And maybe this will help y'all out. But in looking at things that piss us off about other people, so if people are making us angry, if there is frustration, as it is very reasonable and makes a lot of sense that there is. I heard one of my teachers, Sharon Salzberg, say to hate greed, hate misunderstanding or delusion, hate hatred. Don't hate other people. Hate the defilements. Don't hate other people. Hate the defilements. Hate greed, hatred, and delusion. Hate greed, hatred, and misunderstanding. And I was like, dang, that's pretty much right on. It is one way to think of it. Uh, that's really helped me. So I hope it helps you. If there's something really grinding your gears out there, and there's ire and there's anger, directing it toward, I hate misunderstanding. I hate greed. It's the worst. And I think that's a good redirection. Um, so with that, thanks everyone. Thanks for all the great comments and good questions. Yeah. Now I feel like I'm gonna mess around with that tri-wheel. I'm gonna go future tripping. I'll be back in a little bit. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your month. I have not yet decided when I'm going to do the next forecast, but I did just record some rising sign horoscopes for the upcoming Capricorn new moon. It is on December 30th, so there's going to be a video coming in the next week for those rising sign horoscopes. I'm going to do an annual review. That'll be coming out. Stay tuned for when I'm going to do my January forecast. Newsletter is going to come out later this month, so get on that if you want the discounts. Right now, my discount is 10% off. Seagoat, Seagoat, Seagoat for 10% off. Thanks, everyone. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and we will see you next time.